Today's session is covering label design with NiceLabel Pro. We have a lot of training resources for our end users and our partners. So this training is just one of those that we're constantly emailing our end user base, telling them that this is available. If anyone else from their team is just getting started with label design, it's really a great opportunity to learn the basics of it without having to learn the software on your own. And I'll dive right into the NiceLabel Pro software. This is our main label designer that we offer. It's our most popular product. You can pretty much design any type of label you want. There's no real limitations on label design. So you can set up any barcodes, add any text fields, do database connections to pretty much any type of database out there. So it's a really expansive tool. This is used in our standard series product line, included in NiceLabel Suite if you're using that product, and also into our enterprise. This is the core label design tool that you'll be using pretty much across the board with our whole product line. And today I wanted to basically recreate this label for you. We stepped through all the popular components, adding text, time of prints, date and time fields, counters. We'll show an access database connection today as well. And we'll show you how to add a variable picture too. But we have a series of toolbars here. There's a left and a right toolbar. The left toolbar is what you'll be using the majority of the time. This is where you're adding text objects, curved text. If you have text that is going to be a paragraph instead of just line by line with this text object. Rich text fields allow you to have different types of fonts, different symbols within that text box. So it's a lot more advanced. Also, we have barcodes you can easily add, pictures, and different lines and circle and squares, and RFID as well. And there's also a quick button here to different types of barcodes as well. And on the right side of the screen we have our alignment toolbar. So you can left align, right align, or center different text objects. And I'll show you how that really comes into play, especially if you're doing addresses or multiple fields that need to be aligned up perfectly. You don't have to eyeball it. You'll automatically set it up perfectly and even get down to the spacing vertically or horizontally in between these fields. So they're right on the money. And also we have different rotation options here for you too. And on the top of the screen we have a couple different toolbars. You have your text toolbar. You can change the fonts, true type fonts or printer fonts. You can change the size of the font. So very similar to Microsoft Word. So we have that same look and feel. And we have another toolbar here for database connections. And other views are above here. So there's a lot of different areas where you can get to the same tool, but these are just quick access points. One of the big concerns a lot of people have is when they're designing a label, they see question marks on their label. Under the View menu, you have the option of clicking on Data or Normal. Data will show you the actual raw data that's going into that field. But if I click on Normal, it will show question marks, which basically are placeholders. So all these question marks are available fields that you can enter data into. I always change my view to data, just so I can see what I'm working with here, and you like to see what that data looks like on the label. So getting started, I will hit this button for creating a new label, or you could hit File and New, and I'll go up to my window and click on Tile. Now the next step, if you just loaded NiceLabel, there's one key feature that I would recommend that you click on and enable. If you click on the Tools menu, scroll down to User Interface and set Advanced Mode. And this will make sure the size of your toolbars are narrowed down, and it will expose all the advanced features. Otherwise, if you just have it loaded from the installation. You'll get some wizards that will step you through the process, and I just like to remove them so you can get into the core features of the product without having to step through individual wizards. If I set it back to basic mode, kind of see there's a little less screen space to work with, buttons get bigger, it removes some of the advanced toolbars. So it's really personal preference, but once you're getting into more advanced features like we're talking today, then this is very helpful. Also getting across to some of these tool menus here, we have logging capability, so you can keep track of basically everything you printed over a period of time. This is a fresh installation, otherwise it would show date and time of print, the label name, the printer name, quantity, and the status of that job. So very cool feature to keep track of what you printed, and if something happened in the middle of that big batch, you can hit reprint or print a report of printer activity over a given period of time. And to enable that, you would go into the options menu, and there is a log file selection where you can click on local MS access database. So you'll click this little checkbox here, and that will enable the database to keep track of everything that you're printing. Also, another feature to get into when you're first getting started, you want to set up your folders. So here you can see I have a couple things stored on my C drive. Your label file is in this advanced label design folder. I have a certain folder with all the files I'm using for this label today. Otherwise, you may just want to choose the default directory that NiceLabel provides you. There's a label directory and folder that it creates. Pictures, you can reroute the pictures to wherever you have all of your images stored on your computer. This one is stored in the NiceLabel Pictures area. Another area I usually get into is database. So wherever you hold your databases, just want to select that appropriate folder. And this way you can just dump all of your files in these folders, and then NiceLabel automatically looks at this location for the files. So if you ever bring in another label, you may have question marks or the field's not showing up, and that just means that the database connection is broken and it can't find where your database is located. By default, you could always drop your files into the C drive, and that automatically picks it up. So that and the standard default NiceLabel directories are where you should store your folders and files. And you can set up user rights and access if you want to limit people from label design or printing. Typically in a multi-user scenario, this is very helpful. So those are kind of the main features I get into in the tools menu before I get started. And I just have a side-by-side view here, basically showing you how I'm going to recreate this label. But from the other menus, I'll touch on these first. File menu, you can export your label into a graphic, and you can email that to another representative who may not have NiceLabel, because our file formats are .lbl, so it's a proprietary to NiceLabel only. So unfortunately you can't auto-convert labels from other software packages to NiceLabel. It's going to have to be a manual process just because of the proprietary nature of the formats and legalities for that conversion. And under the objects menu, you can see a lot of the same different objects that are on this left toolbar. So just another area to get into. The data menu, this is where you get into the more intense features of the software, connecting to databases, managing variables, or conducting different functions to kind of massage the data that you're bringing in to conform to your label specifications. So this is where you can really get fancy in data handling. And I'll talk about that a little bit more here as we progress with the session. Transformations, this is used for bringing objects to the front or to the back of other objects. Typically if you have a large graphic and are placing text on top of it, that would be a scenario where it would be useful. Or you can group objects together and then move them around with just one click instead of having to move independent fields separately. Alright, so when you click on New to open up your new template, the first thing you need to do is, since I have that advanced mode set up, I can double click on the background of my label and it's going to pop open with the label setup. So this is just quick access to the setup properties. And this is something that you're going to be getting into a lot, especially when you're initially setting up the label. You initially want to set it up for the printer that you have on your computer. These are all pulled from my Windows printers and faxes view. We recommend that you get our Nice drivers from our website, NiceLabel.com, and we have all the major thermal printer models out there for you to download. And they're optimized for printer speed and efficiency. So it's gonna, give you the best experience with NiceLabel, the most different features and modifications. And also, what I typically set is use custom printer settings saved in the label. So any settings that I make to this template, it's going to stay with that label. So if I email it to someone else in my company, all the settings will retain in that template, as opposed to using the default printer settings from the driver. So if you have certain cutter settings, darkness, anything like that, it's fine-tuned in that template, so it's dialed in. Under paper layout, you can adjust portrait to landscape, do rotations. If you want to get into stocks, the only really reason I use the stocks is if I'm using like a sheet of Avery labels. You can just select the number and it will show it's a 3-up label with so many labels on it, and it's already set up for you, so you can type in your address and other information on there. But for the most typical usage, I manually click on the Dimensions tab and type in a width and height from my label. So for this instance, it's going to be a 3x4 label. And the margins, you always want to keep these 0 for your thermal labels, unless you're doing something custom and your stock's a little bit different, or may have a margin around it that you're not supposed to print in. But for the radius, this is basically the corners of your label template, and you can adjust this to make a circular label, or in this instance I just type 0.15, and this gives me a little bit rounded corners on my label template. And if you had rows or columns, you can adjust that here, and you can see there's cutter settings. If you have a cutter enabled, background picture you could set. Sometimes people like to import a background image just as a template, so they can add fields on top of it. They're not going to print the background picture, but it's basically used as a layout. If you ever have some jewelry labels or like those butterfly tags, which are very fancy and special, not the standard rectangular or square label that you're used to printing. And if you're doing any batches or want to have a header or a tail label, this could be used for double-sided printing, or if you want to print this first label and then print another label tied to it in order, so you can do different batches in this type of workflow. So just clicking OK, now you can see it's a 3x4 label template, which matches up exactly with what I have here. I'll start by adding just the text. That's the easiest thing to add. So you can see on the left toolbar we have an A icon. You can simply click on it once, and the A icon is next to your cursor. So whenever you hit any of these objects, it's also going to show you that little icon next to the cursor, so you know what it is. Then you can simply just left click to drop. And I'm just going to type in Nice Company. If I double click on it, you can double click on anything and it will always pop open with the settings for it, so you can get into the more fine tunings and the details of it. And in this scenario, I'm going to click on the Style tab. This is where you can get into basically the size of these text fields and anything else you want to add there. So for this piece of text, I'm going to click on Select, and we'll get into the advanced properties, and I have a Arial 20 8 font. And if I click OK, and OK one more time, I have my nice company created. And you can see it's red, but this means that it's hanging off the label. So I'll move it in the appropriate area, and now it will turn black. And I want to add a rotation onto it too. And this rotation pertains to text fields that are just one line. So if I double click on it again, I'm going to, you see the value tab where you can enter different data. But under appearance, this is where I can add the rotation. So I know it's 8 degrees, and it's going to be anchoring from this upper left-hand corner. I'm actually going to narrow this down to a 26. So now I have the nice company fixed text field. I can add my line tool underneath it just by clicking and then dragging it over. And now I can double click on the properties of this line, and I can change the thickness. And what I had previously for thickness is 0.19, which is a little bit skinnier. I can just move it right underneath. I'll also add this circular ellipse, just so you can see how you can add different circles and different objects. You can see here there's some differences. This is green, and as well as behind the nice company piece of text. So if I double click on my ellipse, I'm going to change the line color to green. Click OK. Now if I right click on it and scroll down to arrange, I'm going to bring it to the back. And now this is how you can do layering, and it's very, very helpful, especially if you're doing color labels or more labels with different graphics on it. You're going to be running into different layering, so you can bring objects to the front or to the back of others. Now I'm going to add these other pieces of fixed text here, from product ID down the box count. And I'm just going to follow the same method. Click on that A icon, type in product ID. And these fields don't have to be aligned up perfectly. I'll show you how you can use that alignment tool to line them up perfectly. Okay, now if you hold down your left mouse button and scroll over all these fields, it will highlight them. Now I can go to my left toolbar, click on the left justification, and scroll down a little bit further for vertically spaced equally. So now you can see they're lined up perfectly now. And then I can drag them over in one solid group. If I want to highlight all these fields, I can move them up as well at the same time. But you can see here I have all the semicolons lined up, so if I highlight them one more time, do a right align, now they're good to go. And on my other label, I'm going to cheat a little bit here. If I move this field up a little bit, this is an inverse field. So you can see as this box goes over the text, it inverses the text from black to white. But if I click on this, I can right click and hit copy, and then click on my new label template, right click and hit paste. So you can paste different fields from label to label. Or you could resave them as a different label name if you choose, but just showing you some different functionality here. Now on the left toolbar, there's this little Create New Inverse Object button. If if I just click once and hold, I can drag it over this field to create that inverse field. So that is how you create an inverse object. But the next fields I want to add are going to be variable. So what we added so far is just fixed. It's never going to change. When we're talking variables, it's a field that is going to be supplied data from a database, or you're typing data in at print time, or it's a date or time field that's going to be changing depending on the date or time. And as you print through maybe your records in the database, all this data could switch from different products. Like you see here on the screen, we show NiceLabel Express, but in the demo today, you'll be able to see as it progresses to NiceLabel Pro, NiceLabel Suite, a different picture pops up, different data will show on that template. And kind of going back to this label here, we have basically variable views here, so you can actually see the variable names in these little yellow fields. And you can choose to have these on there if you like, but it's just basically personal preference, really. A lot of people like to have it just so they can see what fields are variable, what are not. But I will first add a date field. So I haven't showed you these drop-down arrows, but next to everything here you have a drop-down, which gives you more advanced features. So I added fixed text, but now we could add a keyboard input where you're typing data into the field at print time. But I'm going to add a date field here. It gives me a ton of selections here, different formats, depending on how you want that date to appear. You can also type in custom fields here too. And also add different date offsets if you have expiration dates. But if you click finish, now there's that A next to my cursor, I can just click once to drop it. So now I have my date field added. I'm going to follow the same process and add that time field. Again, you have a lot of options here for different time formats. Alright, so we added the date and time fields. Next we want to add the box count. But before we do that, I want to go up to the data menu and now click on variables. Now we can see the date and time field that I just created. So all of your variable fields will be listed here, and we'll show you the properties if you want to get into them or not. I'm going to enable the show internal variables, and this basically shows you other variable fields that are coming from your computer, such as your computer name, label name, printer name. If you ever need to use this on the label, you can. But what I'm interested in is the total quantity printed. And this is going to show me that box count. So now I enabled that variable, and from the drop-down menu I can go down to use existing variable, and now I have that total quantity printed listed. So just click on it and then click again to drop. Now as I print through my labels, it's going to automatically increment and count up. If you just wanted to create a standard counter, you could click on New Counter, type in a starting value, say I have a 3-digit code. It's going to increment. You could prompt the user, so when you hit the print button, it would prompt you to type in a starting counting value. Otherwise, you can have it roll over as well at, say, $9.99, or have different steps, so it changes 2 in a row. So there's a lot of customizations there. And just click the drop. So now I have my counter. And we also have different views. You can do zooming in if you choose. You can zoom right to the label, or you can show a display grid. So So sometimes you like to have that if you're, aligning different fields up, or we have guidelines as well. So you can set a certain guideline. So you can set it up here, and then you can see, oh, this field is a little bit lower than this time of print. All right, now the next step, I'm going to make a database connection. And I'm going to reach out to my database here and show you what it actually looks like. This is a Microsoft Access database. And you can see here there's several columns of data from ID over to picture. And this is basically our NiceLabel product line in our standard series. So I'm just going to show you, I'm going to bring in the code of the product, the version. I'm actually going to combine these two fields together and put them in a new text field. And we'll pull description into another field and pull UPC into our barcode. And then the picture, this is going to be used for a variable picture that we're going to show on the screen. So as I print through these different records, it's basically going to show you a different picture for each product. So you can just store a bunch of different images in a folder somewhere instead of managing 10 different label formats with fixed pictures on each template. And while we're here, I will show you this nice pictures folder. So we have 4 different images here depending on which product I am printing. So we're reaching out to this folder to pull those images. And I have a zip file with all these files, the label file as well as a Word document that steps through step by step on recreating this template. So I'll send that to everyone who attended today so you can pass it on to anyone else, or you can go through on your own and recreate this template when you have a minute. So to make my database connection, I'll click on the data menu, scroll down to database access, and I'm going to use the wizard, and this is going to step me through the database connection process very quickly and easily. I have a direct database connection here. Otherwise, if you had an older database like an ODBC or Borland database, you could choose this option. You simply want to hit the browse button to reach out to your file path where your database is located. So I will click on that access table. I just have one table available called Nice Company, which I just showed you all those product fields in there. And here are all those header fields that show what that field is. So after we connect to this database, we're going to have a variable for each of these fields. So you can drag and drop any of these fields as a piece of text or as a barcode, a picture. And then it will ask you, how do you want to print the labels with this database? In this instance, I'm going to print all the records from the table, and I'm going to print one label for each record. Otherwise, you could prompt the user at print time to select that record from the database. And you could have a field in the database telling the quantity as well. Or you could type it in at print time. So there's a lot of different options here when you set up the database connection. So you really want to think of how you're going to be printing labels and the workflow. And I always choose the second option. Otherwise, it's going to drop a text field on your label for each of those fields in your database, which could be very extensive. So the second option allows you to add it from these drop-down menus with that use existing variable, just like we did previously. So now I click Finish is the last step in the process. The Nice Company database connection is made. Now I can click Close. So now if I go up to my data menu, click on Variables, and now you can see all these different database fields that are connected. And there's different icons. They're yellow pertaining to a database field. Otherwise you can see there's a clock and counter for a counter field. So it kind of gives you a visual of what they are. And then it shows you examples of basically what these data fields are and some sample data from your database for that first line. So you can see here we have NiceLabel Express listed in a rich text box. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my rich text field here. And what I'll do here is I'll just click on RTF. And then it's going to pop open with a screen here so you can type in paragraphs of data. This is where you can get into multiple types of fonts in one field. Otherwise you'd have to set them up separately. And what I'm going to type in here, I'm going to type in description. And this is going to be the fixed field. But after description, I just hit space twice, I'm going to add the NiceLabel description from my database. So it's going to tell me what product this is. And it would say NiceLabel Express or NiceLabel Pro. Now this little button here, I need to click to add it. Now this is the variable field that's going to be changing after the fixed description. And if I select this whole field, I can change the font, make it a little bit larger to a 10 point. Alright. And then you can resize it appropriately. If I double click on this field, there's a detail tab. And you may get into instances where you have a database with one field that ranges in size. It may be small sometimes, or you may have a very long field length. So in order to not error out the label software, so you may have a text field that stretches way across the label out of range that could throw you an error. So you could set up best fit, set up a minimum or a maximum font size allowable for this field. And depending on how big this text field is, it's going to increase or decrease the size. So I'm going to remove that here for the demo today, but I'm going to make sure to leave enough space here because I know there's limited fields here and I know the appropriate length available. Alright, so that is the next variable field that we just added. Now I'm going to add the product ID. I combined here V5 and NLE. And to do that, you need to use a function. And functions are very helpful, especially when you're getting into compliance labels. When you want to combine multiple fields into a text field, or most specifically a barcode. A lot of compliance labels have many fields packaged into one barcode that you need to customize and program. And there's a lot of specs out there that you have to exactly set up that barcode. So I'm going to click on New. I'm going to type in a name for this function. I'm going to call it concatenate. And concatenate is a term used when you're combining fields together. A subset would be taking a subset or a piece of data out of one field. So if I wanted to take, maybe NiceLabel, these first maybe 10 characters out of this full field length, I could do that. And I've used this before for certain compliance labels. I just need to take a couple, fields away from this part number and put it into another field. So you can do that with these functions, and you don't have to be a programmer to do it either. So click on concatenate, and now it's going to give me a list of all my variables that I have available, and I need to click on them in order, and that's going to be combined together. So I need my version, and as I click on it, they're going to be selected here on the right side, and code is the second one. My output variable is going to be called concatenate, so it's a totally new variable created that have these both combined together. So I can still use my code and version separately if I want. Now under the delimiter, You can choose to have one or not. It's probably not a good idea for barcodes, but for this example, I'm going to type a hyphen, and this is going to be the separator between these two fields. Now if I click OK, I have my function created. Click Close. Now I'll go up to this little drop-down arrow next to the text icon, use existing variable, and you can see there's a little f of x function icon next to my concatenate that I just added. So you just click once to drop. Alright. And I have a couple other variable fields that I'd like to add as well. But essentially, I want to remove some of these variable names just so you can see the actual raw data. So the next field I'm going to add is going to be the barcodes. So the first barcode I'm going to add is the UPC barcode. So to do this, very, very simple. I have my barcode icon, there's a drop-down arrow, and if you remember my Access database, there's a UPC field in there. And it will say Nice Company UPC. So I believe it's 11-digit field here. So I just click and drop. And you can see it's not a UPC barcode. By default, we're dropping a code 128, but you can easily modify it. I'm going to shrink down this field a little bit here. So now I'll move this barcode onto my label, double click on it so I can get into the properties. We can see it's pulling from this variable field in the database. Otherwise, if it was fixed, you could just type in data to go into the barcode. The barcode tab gives you a full set of options here to select any type of barcode you want. UPC-A is what we're looking for today. And if you click Define, you can get into the fine-tunings of this barcode, the height, the width. Typically with the width, this is tied to the mil spec, which you see right here. It's MILS, and it's basically related to the mil size, 1/1000th of an inch. So if you increase this narrow bar width, it's going to jump up the mil spec. Usually you want to stick between like 10 and 15 or 10 and 20, but it really doesn't matter. It matters more or less on the quality of your printer, how small you can print, and the DPI or resolution of it. Typically I shoot for about 15. And you could choose to print this as a graphic, or I could print it natively through Zebra's ZPL code. Because if you're printing as a graphic, it's going to be sent down to the printer at print time as a much larger piece of data. So it's going to slow down your printing. But if you have it as a Zebra native barcode font, then it's going to be using Zebra's kind of native language that they created, ZPL. And it's going to send less data down, less characters. Because if you captured the print job or printed to a file, you can see all the data that's being sent to the printer, and you narrow down or limit the amount of commands sent down, so it's going to be a faster process of printing. You have a check digit. This is auto-generated for this barcode, and human readable. You can choose to have it below, or you could remove it if you wish. And detailed, you can click on quiet zones, and it basically gives you a little bit buffer left and right so no other text fields can intervene with this barcode for issues with scannability. But everything looks good there. I can manually just resize this barcode from the corner, just like you can do to any field. Alright, so now I have my fields created for the UPC. The next field I'm going to add is this barcode. This is a code 128, which is probably the most popular barcode that we use. And with this barcode, I'm going to combine two fields together and put that right into this barcode. Now if I go up to the data menu, click on Functions. And I'll click on New. And when you set up different names and variable names, it's a rule of thumb not to have spaces in between, because that could cause potential errors in the future. So you either want to put in an underscore or you just want to mesh the data together. Now for this one, I'll pull in, you could even pull in a concatenated field if you want. And you could pull in a version. So really anything you want to combine in there together. That's going to create this output variable concatenate 1. Now if I go down to use existing variable for this barcode, I have concatenate 1 set up. So now you can see it added a UPC barcode. Since that is the last one I created, it automatically chooses that for your next barcode. So I'm just going to get into the properties there. And I want to click on code 128. Now if I click define, I want to remove the human readable from this barcode. So click no interpretation. I can click OK. And I can drag this barcode down manually. And then also from the corner, I can stretch it out. Alright, so that's my code 128 barcode field. Now the next step, I'm going to step through a little bit more design component here. And what I want to create here is the matchup to my image. You can see here I have a picture of my NiceLabel box product. So there's a picture icon here. So we're following the same suit. Whenever you're adding a variable for a field, you can just click on use existing variable. But this time I want to select picture. If I click once to drop, it's showing me a question mark. This means that this image is not linked to my folder of images. So the first step, we want to go out, Tools, Options, and folders. So we see here it's pointed to Advanced Label Design folder / nice pictures. So that is correct. But now if I go up to my data menu, click on variables, I'm going to locate this picture variable. And I see it's just stating express, which is just provided from the database. So this is just the value. But instead, I want to show the file path here, so it links this variable to that folder. Now this is where it's going to want you to add the prefix and suffix. So if I merge over to my nice pictures area, I'm going to highlight this and click copy. And I'm just going to hit Control V, or you could right click and hit paste. I'm going to make sure I hit the backslash here so it completes the file path. And .jpg is going to be typed in the suffix. So prefix and suffixes can be used for fields on your label. If you want to have like preliminary data or a couple pieces of text before a database field appears, you could type that in here. Or if you want to appear after the variable field. So this is used in some compliance labels, but today we're just showing you how to complete the location of that picture. And .jpg is the JPEG format. So all I have in my database is the name of the product. So Express, Pro, Suite. It doesn't say suite.jpg. So this is making the total connection here. Now if I click OK, the file path is set, and you can see the picture is now added. The next step, I can add a rectangular outline if I wish. Just by dragging it around the corners. You could do the same type of resizing if you want. Narrow down the thickness of it or change the color. But it's kind of taken away from my label, so I'll just remove it. Say you want to lock down your fields of your label after you set it up, so no one else can modify it. You can click on a field here. So you want to right click on it and click on Position Locked. Now a little lock sign appears here, so I can't modify it, I can't move it. Another layer of defense, going to the File menu, click on Properties, go way over to Advanced, and you click on Label Locked, Password Protection, and you can set your password so you can't unlock this label unless you have the password for it. So perfect for compliance labels. So if you're supplier, you have this label dialed in for JCPenney, and you can just lock everything down, set a password, and then you're safe for people not making changes to it or making it out of compliance so you wouldn't get a chargeback. We also have features for RFID. If you're ever getting into that, this red icon will light up if you're using an RFID printer. And then basically our screen pops up and it will show you properties of that RFID pertaining to the printer you have loaded. In this instance, I have my Zebra R110XI, which is an RFID printer loaded. And it will show you different basically tag types that are supported by this print driver. Then you can get into different fields. You can program variables into it. So basically setting up your RFID, and it will basically allow you to encode any data you want into the tag. So it's kind of hard to see here, but you can see kind of a rough outline of an RFID ghost logo. It's not going to print, but for the sample here today, I just wanted to show you kind of a visual of how that basically how that occurs. And now I'm just going to remove the RFID here. But I stepped through a lot of the standard design components here of NiceLabel Pro. We also set up a lot of shorter videos, and we put them on YouTube. So if you just go on to I removed the RFID there.